Mark Benson was the man everyone trusted, until Detective Erin Cole uncovered the basement that turned a beloved neighbor into the town's worst nightmare. In Pine Hollow, nothing ever seemed out of place. It was the kind of town where people left their doors unlocked, where neighbors greeted each other by name, and where the loudest sound at night was the wind rustling through the trees. At the heart of this quiet community lived Mark Benson, a man so ordinary that no one ever looked twice. He was in his late 40s, had graying hair, and drove a tan SUV that blended into every parking lot. People knew him as the helpful neighbor, the guy who offered to mow lawns for the elderly and dropped off extra groceries during storms. He coached the under-17 soccer team and was known for bringing orange slices and cheering the loudest from the sidelines. Parents trusted Mark. Kids liked him. He had a calm, patient way about him that made him seem like the safest adult in the room. What no one realized was that Mark had spent years perfecting this image. He made sure to never cross any obvious boundaries, never said anything questionable, never left a reason to doubt him. His friendliness was measured, his generosity strategic. Behind every kind gesture was calculation. He was not just blending in, he was hiding in plain sight. Mark lived alone in a red brick house at the edge of town. The outside looked ordinary, but the inside was meticulously arranged. He kept everything clean, labeled, and compartmentalized. On the surface, it was the home of a quiet man who liked structure. But downstairs, in a basement hidden behind layers of shelving and a locked steel door, he kept his secrets. The room was soundproof, with padded walls and dim lighting. It had been carefully designed and built over years, piece by piece. He told contractors he was setting up a music studio, and no one questioned it. Over the past 2 years, 5 teenagers had disappeared from the surrounding areas. The cases never received much attention. The police suspected they were runaways. Some had left behind vague notes. Others had been reported missing days after their last sighting. No bodies were found. There were no obvious signs of foul play. Different counties handled each case, and no connections were made between them. What no one suspected was that all 5 teens had crossed paths with Mark Benson in the weeks before their disappearances. He was careful. He never took from his own town. He visited neighboring areas under the pretense of volunteering or attending sports matches. He selected victims who had unstable family lives, hoping their cases would be ignored or misclassified. He stalked quietly, planned thoroughly, and moved without drawing attention. Mark felt untouchable. With each successful abduction, his confidence grew. He believed he was smarter than the police, more disciplined than other criminals. He kept trophies from each victim, small items, often meaningless to others but significant to him, a keychain, a wristband, a torn photograph. These were the only signs of what he had done, and they remained locked away, untouched, hidden in the darkness beneath his ordinary life. Lily Ramirez was the kind of girl who paid attention to details. At 16, she was fiercely independent and rarely missed soccer practice. Her coaches praised her discipline, and her friends admired her intuition. On a Thursday afternoon, just before sunset, Lily vanished on her usual walk home from practice. Her family reported her missing the same evening, but there were no witnesses, no immediate clues, and no sign of a struggle. To the authorities, it looked like another case of a teenager choosing to run away, but her parents knew better. Lily wasn't the type to leave without telling anyone. She had too much ahead of her: school, a college scholarship in progress, and a future she was genuinely excited about. It wasn't until a few days later that her friend, Tara, remembered the last photo Lily had taken on her phone. It was a blurry snapshot of the soccer team at practice, taken just before they all left the field. On a whim, Tara shared the picture with her dad, who worked in IT. He noticed something odd in the background: a familiar car parked just outside the fence near the woods. He enhanced the image and zoomed in. The license plate was unreadable, but the car itself was distinct: a tan SUV with a dented left fender and a faded soccer bumper sticker. He thought it looked like Mark Benson's car. At first, the police brushed it off. Mark was well known and trusted. His car being near the field wasn't unusual. He helped out with practices often. But one newly assigned detective, Erin Cole, had a different reaction. She had come to Pine Hollow only months ago and hadn't been charmed by Mark's reputation the way others had. She decided to quietly check his background and was surprised by what she found. Mark had lived in 5 different towns in the last 6 years, and in each of those places a teenager had gone missing. The timing was eerily aligned. Each disappearance occurred within months of him moving in. And each time after the missing persons case went cold, Mark relocated again. Erin knew this wasn't enough to act on. Circumstantial evidence wouldn't hold up, so she began building a profile, looking deeper into public records, property details, and old police files. She searched for any overlap, surveillance footage, visitor logs, sightings. Eventually, she discovered that in 3 of the 5 cases, Mark had signed up for events or volunteer opportunities near the time the teens vanished. These weren't coincidences anymore. They were pieces of a much larger puzzle. She submitted her findings to her department and requested a search warrant, citing the photo and the matching vehicle, as well as the suspicious timeline. Her superiors were skeptical, but allowed her to proceed under strict limitations. Erin knew this was her one chance. If Mark truly was behind the disappearances, time was running out. And if he wasn't, if she was wrong, she would be accusing one of the town's most respected residents without solid ground. But her instincts told her she wasn't wrong. The photo was more than a coincidence. It was the first crack in the perfect mask. Detective Erin Cole arrived at Mark Benson's house just before noon, accompanied by a small team under the pretense of a follow-up on a neighborhood break-in. Mark wasn't home. He was at the animal shelter like clockwork every Friday. Erin had used that consistency to time the visit. With the warrant quietly in hand, the officers moved through the house methodically. At first, everything looked harmless. The living room was spotless. The kitchen was organized with military precision. Family photos, though none of actual relatives, lined the walls, painting the picture of a man deeply involved in the community. They moved to the second floor and found nothing out of place. Closets were tidy, the guest room unused. Then they approached the basement. It was locked behind a sliding shelf unit that appeared fixed to the wall. One officer gently pushed, and the entire shelf shifted slightly. Erin noticed faint scuff marks on the floor. It wasn't just a decorative unit. It was hiding something. Behind the shelf was a reinforced steel door with a digital lock. The team called in a locksmith, citing the warrant, and within 20 minutes, the lock clicked open. The air behind it was heavy, stale, and unnervingly cold. The officers descended slowly, flashlights cutting through the dimness. What they found was more than a hidden room. It was a space built with purpose. The walls were padded with soundproof foam. A single overhead light buzzed softly. A table stood in the center, lined with meticulously arranged objects. There were photographs, some printed from video stills, others taken from a distance. All of them showed teenagers, some of whom were already listed as missing. Tacked beside the photos were maps with hand-drawn circles and markings, school bus routes, practice fields, parks. Notes written in block letters detailed movements, routines, even locker combinations. To the right, a long shelving unit held items enclosed in clear plastic bags. A heart-shaped pendant, a pair of cleats, a torn hoodie sleeve. Every object was labeled with dates and cryptic symbols. These weren't random keepsakes. They were trophies, one from each victim. A small monitor in the corner displayed a paused surveillance feed. Erin recognized the location immediately. It was the entrance to Pine Hollow Park, where Lily Ramirez had vanished. The feed was stored on a hard drive below the desk, along with several others labeled by date and location. Further examination uncovered evidence far more disturbing. Restraints tucked beneath the table, medical gloves in sealed boxes, and a roll of duct tape unused but ready. It was clear this wasn't just a trophy room. It was a hunting ground turned lair. Forensic teams were called in immediately. DNA swabs were taken. Photos were documented. Erin knew what they had found was enough not only to arrest Mark Benson, but to link him directly to every missing teen in the case files. The mask had finally come off. Behind the charm and community service was a predator who believed he had engineered the perfect trap. But the walls he built to hide his crimes had finally been torn down, and there was no turning back. When news of the hidden basement broke, the town of Pine Hollow fell into a state of disbelief. For decades, Mark Benson had been a fixture of trust and familiarity. Now, that image shattered in an instant. As investigators removed boxes of evidence from his home, residents watched in stunned silence. Some cried, others couldn't even speak. No one could understand how someone so visible, so woven into the fabric of their daily lives, could be capable of such evil. Back at the police station, Mark sat in an interrogation room for hours. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't say a word. He sat upright, expressionless, hands folded on the table. Detectives came and went, presenting photos, listing names, laying out evidence, but nothing broke his silence. His face didn't twitch, his eyes didn't move. It was as if the man who had once led pep talks and handed out snacks had ceased to exist. In his place was a void. It wasn't until the third day that his mask finally slipped. During a routine transfer between holding areas, a camera caught him grinning, brief, fleeting, but unmistakable. That single frame told investigators everything they needed to know. Mark wasn't remorseful. He wasn't afraid. He was proud. It wasn't about the victims anymore. It was about the game, and in his mind he had played it well. But cracks had already begun to show in his confidence. Detectives had uncovered a sticky note found in the bottom of one of Lily Ramirez's old notebooks. It was faded but still legible. 4 numbers that matched the first half of Mark's license plate. She had written them down days before she disappeared. No one had noticed until now. It was a clue missed the first time, but now it served as hard evidence. Public outrage grew as more details emerged. News channels aired reports nonstop. Photos of the hidden basement were leaked online, sparking national attention. Families of the missing teens came forward, some speaking for the first time, revealing strange interactions they'd had with Mark in the past, small moments they had brushed off, a compliment that lingered too long, a too frequent appearance at school events. They realized in hindsight what they'd missed, and the weight of guilt was suffocating. Even more disturbing was the discovery that Mark had recorded everything. Hidden cameras, audio logs, folders of neatly dated recordings, he had documented his crimes with clinical precision. Forensic teams spent weeks cataloging the material, and each file uncovered more evidence, not just of what he had done, but of how far he was willing to go. Mark had built a life of lies around structure and control. But now, stripped of his home, his trophies, and his carefully managed persona, all that remained was a man staring down the walls of his own unraveling empire. And as investigators pieced together his timeline, the terrifying truth became clearer. If they hadn't caught him when they did, someone else would have disappeared within weeks. Mark wasn't finished. He was just waiting for his next move. The courtroom was packed on the first day of Mark Benson's trial. Families of the victims sat together in silence, their grief etched into their faces. Reporters filled the back rows, cameras clicking as Mark was led in wearing a plain gray prison jumpsuit. He showed no emotion, no recognition of the pain surrounding him. As the judge read out the charges, multiple counts of abduction, unlawful confinement, and first-degree murder, he stared ahead without blinking. It was the first time many had seen him since his arrest, and the man who once smiled at community picnics now looked like a ghost of himself. The prosecution moved swiftly, laying out the mountain of evidence collected from his home. The hidden room, the labeled trophies, the surveillance files, and the forensic results all pointed in one direction. DNA from 2 victims had been found on restraints in the basement. Personal belongings of all 5 missing teens were confirmed to be in his possession. Surveillance footage, recovered from his hard drives, showed chilling clips of his movements as he stalked his victims, recording their routines and vulnerabilities. As the days passed, the courtroom heard testimony from law enforcement, forensic experts, and the families of those who had disappeared. Each statement painted a clearer picture of Mark's methodical and calculated behavior. He hadn't acted out of impulse. He had planned each crime in detail. His pattern was one of control, of watching, waiting, and striking when no one was paying attention. Mark remained silent throughout the trial. He declined to speak in his defense. But everything changed during sentencing. When given the opportunity to address the court, he stood slowly and walked to the podium. The room held its breath, waiting for remorse, an apology, or even a sign of regret. Instead, he looked directly at the judge and spoke in a calm, flat voice. He admitted to everything, not with guilt, but with cold finality. He explained how he had learned to avoid suspicion, how he'd built trust to hide in plain sight. He spoke as if giving a lecture, not confessing to crimes. He never mentioned his victims by name. He ended with a chilling statement that he never made mistakes, only miscalculations, and that he had fully expected to continue without ever being caught. The silence that followed was deafening. Some in the courtroom wept. Others stared blankly, unable to process what they had just heard. The judge, visibly shaken, delivered the maximum sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, multiple times over. Mark Benson was taken away in handcuffs, vanishing behind locked doors for good. His house was demolished by court order weeks later. The lot where it once stood became a memorial, covered in flowers, candles, and handwritten notes. Pine Hollow would never be the same. The scars left behind by Mark's crimes would never fully heal. But his downfall marked a turning point. A reminder that even the most trusted faces can hide the darkest intentions, and that sometimes evil wears a mask of kindness until it's forced to fall.